Okay, so we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality, and we're all connected. This is how I start the videos always, because it's the basis of a human on Earth. Now, today I'm going to say that a few days ago someone told me, and I was not aware of this, which shows you once again that I don't know a real lot. Now, this is about Superman. Superman, you know, the superhero. And this could apply, I suppose, to Wonder Woman or Iron Man, the one that I couldn't think of, etc. That's interesting. But Superman evidently, and I only found this out 2 days ago, had a weakness. And his weakness was kryptonite. Kryptonite made Superman almost powerless or very weak, evidently. Now, this is something that just occurred to me. Yes, now human beings are spiritual beings in a physical world, and they're in a physical body. Now, this world is kryptonite for the human being. Just as kryptonite was the enemy, in a way, of Superman. Superman. Human beings are meant to be Superman. Wonder Woman. Iron Man. No, not Iron Man. Perhaps not Iron Man. We might leave him out of it, okay? I think we'll leave Iron Man out of the equation. But Superman, okay, we will go with that. See, what I'm trying to say is that originally, as I've said, or at least this is my fantasy of how a human being should be, could have been, and even still could be, under the right conditions. But you see, Superman is exposed to kryptonite, and kryptonite renders Superman powerless or very weak. And this is essentially what occurred to me with human beings on Earth. The Earth itself now is kryptonite to the human being. Some people might say we are kryptonite to Earth. This I will not go into, because of course there is negativity in the world, because we are in a negative Earth with a negative force that rules the Earth, and negative people, disciples, entities, minions that follow the negative force or the negative God entity. Now, I leave it to you who are listening, that have more knowledge than me and are more thoughtful that way, to put names or titles on these gods, these entities, and even on the disciples, and even on the minions, and even on some humans. I mainly deal in humans, because I'm a limited human. Very limited, as we all are, I think, most of us, because we are Superman under the influence of kryptonite. Now, what causes what is kryptonite in this earth? You know, we know it in the fantasy with Superman. Well, this is a fantasy too, but it's real if you think that certain things are kryptonite to the human, and it's real if you think that humans are at their lowest level and have not evolved to their full potential and are devolving in a different direction. This is all depends on your own fantasy and what you think a human is or what you think is now, etc. I'm not going to go there because it's too complicated for me and it's not something that I fully understand. But like I say, you can fill in the titles because, you know, you can call yourself any name. And it could fit certain history, of course. But either way, you know, human beings, in my opinion now, are under the influence of kryptonite, okay? So that means that they are very weak and very limited, like Superman. That's assuming you think that we are at our lowest level and that we are Superman under the influence of kryptonite. Okay, but anyway, that was just me picking up on things like I do to try to make it interesting somehow. Although it is certainly more than interesting, it's just that I can't get it into a coherent way of putting things. And there's so much information, so much that is, it's complicated, and yet I think that underneath it all, I'm a simple person and I like to keep things simple, and I almost have to anyway. But I think that, you know, there's kind of like a basics to a lot of things anyway, so it's good if you can know all the details. It's good if you know how everything really works 100%. But, you know, I'm not one of those people that's going to know that because, you know, I've only realised that we're in a strange earth in very recent times, you know, like getting only a full realisation, or at least a full realisation of the unreality of it all in the last 12 months fully even, you know. But at any rate, like I say, Superman is in a world that is made of kryptonite, okay? Now, I will have to look up Superman and the full story to make this more interesting, but perhaps we'll forget about the Superman and just say that this world now is kryptonite to a spiritual human being because it's not conducive to their body in any way. I personally think that, and this is just my own personal thing, that even in the past, the world was never perfect for the human being. In my lifetime anyway. I can't go back even before full technology and that sort of thing. But the thing is that I would think that, you know how I always pretty much centre on technology and say that is the kryptonite for the human being because it's not the right frequency. Everything is frequency, vibration and energy, I am told. I do not understand these things. I'm ignorant. But I understand that their artificial frequencies go through the air, the Wi-Fi, all the tech, and we use everything that is technical. And I now realise or think that all technology is kryptonite to the human being. All technology can be a negative force for a human being, a negative frequency, a negative vibration, a negative energy, depending on who is using it, where it's coming from, what the purpose is, but most of it is negative even naturally. But, as we are in a negative earth matrix that is a certain frequency, and the human being, because the human being is a spiritual human being and is meant to naturally be of a higher frequency, I think, this can change the frequency of the matrix, and the matrix does not want to lose its frequency. So human beings are Superman placed onto an earth that is made of kryptonite. And kryptonite renders Superman weak and powerless. Evidently. I shall have to look this up after I've done the video. I will. But I've never been big on superheroes and Wonder Woman and all those superhero things or comic books. I've never read them. I've always found them, strangely enough, you'd probably think from me, too far-fetched. The same as the movies, the science fiction and things. Not my cup of tea in the past, because thought not possible. Like to watch only realistic things with a few human beings in. But of course that was in the old world, when things were more natural, more simple, and that was a fantasy too, as everything is a fantasy, I think, now. And to find a reality amongst all this fantasy is not easy, and the reality is a dark one. So therefore a lot of people don't want to find any reality anyway, because it's kind of, as it is, a lot of people, I think that we don't really live in a real positive world anyway. But it's but it is all, like I say, it is very much a fantasy all round. Now, I'm going to go in this video to a really dark fantasy. I'm going to go, because fairy tales can be dark. Like I say, in Snow White you have the wicked queen, who transforms herself even to the wicked old lady that looks like a wicked witch and gives her the poisonous apple, pretending to be just a decrepit old lady or something like that. And you have the queen who is so full of her own power and so full of her own vanity in a way, because she looks in the mirror and has to be reassured. But essentially it's someone that likes their position and doesn't want to lose it, and is threatened by I would honestly say that in Snow White, is an innocent little spiritual human being that just likes to sit amongst the birds and raise the vibration. And the queen and her land is not of that vibration. The queen, her land that she controls and rules over, is of a lower vibration, and she's all powerful and all beautiful and everything in this low vibrational land, because the queen is not authentic. The queen is not a spiritual being. The queen is a different type of being. I would say. She might have some spirit, but it's a dark spirit at best. But at any rate, I've gone off onto Snow White, and I'm going to go into something even darker. So we're going to go into a fairy tale, a fantasy world, which you see in movies anyway, like they go into that, dark stories, dark books. It's just a matter of whether you think they're a possibility, whether you think that they are part of the past, whether you think they're part of the future, or whether you think they're a possibility for now. I think the past, present, and the future, even though I do not experience any of these things myself, I do not understand these things myself, I find them all pretty supernatural and bizarre and strange and weird and, I was about to say wonderful, but no, maybe not so wonderful, because they are not conducive to a human being. They're not conducive to any human being, because even non-spiritual human beings will be brought down by a negative reality, by a dark spirits, by that negative low frequency mentality that can totally invade us and does. I say at low frequency, the Archon mind parasites. The Archon is a negative force. And it doesn't matter if I haven't got it right, because I don't understand these things at a technical, scientific, or that type of physical level, because I don't go into that. I'm in concepts and fairy tales, but also, there is a reality, I would think, to all of this, but it's not a reality that we can see because we're limited. So, if a mind parasite comes into my domain, shall we say, and it doesn't matter what it's powered by, or who's sent it, or who's behind it, or what it actually is, it comes in because of my personality, my mood, my frequency, my demeanour, because you're essentially spiritual, a spirit. And it's a bit hard to explain, and I'm sure I'm not getting it very clearly even myself. But then that is like an open gate, a floodgate open to a negative thought even. And the negative thought is the Archon mind parasite. It comes in with the idea of feeding your spirit and your mind with negativity. It puts a simple thought in, and it's up to you whether you can let go of that thought or whether you entertain it. And most of the time we entertain it, dwell on it, and even act on it. And we speak it. I know that's what I do. I try very hard not to verbalize the anger or the frustration or the, or to react negatively to the vibration around me. Because, this is the thing, is that it's like some people have allowed themselves to become very negative and very low frequency, so the mind parasites can just come in and have a field day. They can have a ball, they can party, and that's what they want to do, because they're negative entities. They're negative entities that possess some people, literally possess them. Now this is something that, like the Exorcist movie, except that that's an extreme example. But it's an extreme example only because it's a fantasy and it's a horror movie. But, people can become possessed by a negative way of looking at things. Negative thoughts prevail in their mind. They feel negative about themselves, they feel negative about other people, and that is a low vibration. Now, people can be possessed by negativity and negative thoughts. Most people think that all their thoughts are their own. They don't think they're coming from the matrix. The matrix is the earth. If the earth becomes negative, it sends negative vibrations, negative thoughts. I'm being very airy-fairy here. I do not know what I'm talking about. I'm making it up as I go along. Okay? But, either way, there might be something in it. I think there's a lot in it. I think there's much, much more in it than what I know. I think that if I could raise my vibration, which I think I was on the verge of doing at some point, just accidentally, just by realising and wanting to live a little bit, because I don't think I was ever someone that was going to live a lot. But maybe this matrix earth is so precariously in the balance of, at some point, of slipping into a more positive vibration, that maybe even a few people just raising it a little poses a big threat to the disintegration of this matrix earth. I say disintegration because really it's probably not possible for this matrix to just collapse or to explode into a million whatever it is, whatever the filaments or whatever. I don't think so, but to those that operate and, the God entity, that poses a threat to their matrix, which is where we live too, but it's not our matrix. Because, different energies, shall we say, life forms of different sorts. See, I don't know what I'm talking about here, but they are only comfortable and can only survive and live in a certain frequency or in a certain environment. Like I say, human beings are like fish out of water and like Superman under the influence of kryptonite. They are not in an environment that I don't think that is conducive for them being at their house level, but it may be a very suitable environment for the matrix, because the matrix is okay. I was going to go into the dark realm, the fantasy dark world. So we're opening up a storybook now, a fairy tale that's going to be dark, and it is, and I don't know why I'm half smiling, because I should be very distressed really in doing this, but I'm going to say it's a fantasy, and I'm just going to go into it like this, right? Yes, we And I'm only talking about human beings, spiritual human beings. If you're not a spiritual human being, you don't have, well, you might still have something to worry about. I don't know, because I don't, even in a fantasy world, you're not sure exactly how it's going to pan out for everyone. I know that it's kryptonite for a human being, only in the sense that a human being in this matrix Earth, low frequency, low energy, all negativity, cannot possibly naturally reach their full potential. And they can't evolve at all. And we haven't. Now, I personally blame a lot of this dark stuff on the technology, because I think that it is the opposite, as I've said before, to the natural spiritual human being, because it is an unnatural environment, and that affects the human being to where they're staying at a low level. Now, see, but because we are in a dark, a negative, low frequency, low vibrational Earth, and have been for as long as I would know, but of course I can't time travel to go back, which is why I am talking through my hat with most things. But even before technology, even though we've had technology now for quite a long time, but I mean, because you see, now we have the internet, we have Wi-Fi, we have technology, vibrations and frequency going through the air. It is a technological matrix completely. It is just covered in it. But even before that, because I wasn't around I was around before the internet and all that, but we had television and still had forms of technology. Look, everything is technology to some extent. The car you drive is technology. So, I'm automatically losing anyone listening by saying, hey, driving a car may or may not be a good thing. Now, look, you need it to get around. But these things can be used negatively. In this world we are now, all these things have been created and given to the matrix for negative, because I think it is now on a fairy tale timeline. And as we head towards the end, the end of our lives or our existence, any form of technology can be used negatively. It can be used positively too, but that is also only because we're limited. See, what appears to be positive in this world, in my opinion, in my fantasy way of looking at things, is that even the things we use which are a benefit to us, like a car that gets you around. Superman didn't need a car, you see. But under the influence of kryptonite, he needs technology, he needs a car. He has to become not a Superman, but a very weak human being. And so he needs a car. And this is I know this is not a very good example. I picked a very poor example, so I probably lost people in saying that, because I can only just think of things as they come. But you get my drift, that if you could fly, you don't really need a car, because a lot of people like cars, and I like lots of things of the Matrix too. But I wouldn't know if that is the be and end all. Like, it could well be that the Matrix offers very little, but if you think it's all there is, then it appears to be very good, you see. If you can't possibly imagine that we should be a lot better and that we should be able to have all we want, then everything the Matrix offers is very enticing, even though it's essentially kind of negative. Now, I was going to go into the dark realm, and I better keep going before the video runs out, because that can happen now, because I just can't keep going. It's not live or anything. Now, we have this earth, and we've had a World War One, and we've had a World War Two, and they've largely been physical battles. In my fantasy, we are in, and well into, and maybe even heading towards the close of a World War III. But it's not the same as World War One and World War Two, where it was all visually physical. World War III is a real fantasy war, because it is not like you would imagine. It's not like you would see on a movie where, obviously, in some parts of the world right now, people are physically fighting. So they are engaging in World War III. Because when it comes down to it, it's all only about human beings. So if there is, different battles will be going on with human beings. Now, but they're not all, some of them are invisible, but only invisible to those that don't see and expect a battle to be waged a certain way. A bit like, they say cancer is the silent killer. That's what they advertise it. Well, it's like that. Because anything that kills or injures or destroys a human being is it's destruction, and that's a war, So it can be from a whole lot of different sources, and they're not always things that you can see, because, if cancer is the silent killer, we don't know where it comes from. Of course, everything comes from the Matrix, but we don't know that, because the Matrix, is always dark and light, and it's always, things get contaminated, things get, things get destroyed, and the negative energy affects human beings. This is putting it in a fantasy way, but essentially You know, it is. It's a bit like the movie Beyond Thunderdome. That's a movie. The Mad Max movies. I'm going to go on to the movies now if I can. And Beyond Thunderdome, I think, was the third one. And just the title. Just see, I'm very synchronicity type now. We'll talk about synchronicity a wee bit in maybe another video or in this one if there's any time, because synchronicity is simply things that you see anywhere, or I think this is what it means, but this is what happens to me anyway, and it happens to everybody every day of their life. The only difference is that one day, you know, you see it and you realise that it's happening all the time, but it's been happening since the day you were born, but you just didn't notice it. You put everything down to coincidence, or to, oh yeah, I was thinking that, or this or that, and now it's popped up. Oh, this, you know. But when you get onto it and you become aware of it, it just instantly makes sense. You just know what, and like, well, anyway, I've gone silly again and going off track, but like Beyond Thunder Dome, you know, the movie is the song even. There was the song even. Beyond Thunder Dome. They want to get beyond the dome. Thunderdome is this big construction. This is meant to be set in the future, you know, even though they're all rather primitive kind of in it in a way, because I think a lot's been destroyed, you know, and they've got this big area that's like a great big field, but it's got a big dome over the top. And they fight in there for their amusement. The god, it's a female one that runs it in this movie, if my memory serves me correctly, because it's been quite a few years since I've seen it. Probably not a good example either, but it just came to me. And that is like the god, you could say, right? If we want to compare it to the earth. Because whoever runs things, who's ever in charge of everything, whoever dictates and tells what the other humans and the ones that are in it, the different beings, because there were some unusual characters even in that one, if I remember correctly, but it doesn't matter either way. But, you know, they fight one another to the death in the Thunderdome. And they only get to leave the dome if they're victorious. Not quite sure what point I'm trying to make here. I think I've lost my own thing. It's okay. Well, another example, of course, but I'm losing is here, I think, and I'm actually losing my own self. Another thing that is a bit similar, except that it's not like Thunderdome, but it's where, like, the wrestlers, you know, I've seen a few wrestling matches in recent times, and they have, like, you know, the stage, the wrestling ring, but in some more special matches they'll have what they call a cage match, and this is where they have a big cage, you know, up above the ring. It's up above the ring, but it just gradually comes down, and the two wrestlers are standing in the ring, and they have to fight till only one can be victorious and only one can get out of the cage through the door. The door's locked behind while they battle it out. I'm not very good at talking about battles because I don't even like war movies, and I don't even like these matches actually, but the theatrics of them can be entertaining. Now I take them a bit too seriously, so I don't watch them. In the old world, I could watch some negative, dark things and enjoy them. Now, because I take the fairy tales too serious, because I've become too negative, I don't enjoy watching them as much. I take it too serious. But at any rate, I think that this is very much like in my fairyland version of this technical world we live in, that cage that is looming above the two wrestlers and slowly comes down. While it's coming down, I suppose one of the wrestlers or both of them could say, hey, I don't think we want to battle it out. Let's get out of here. Let's not bother fighting. But, I think that we're like that with technology. It's up there coming down around us. Well, actually, I think it already has, but it could be more so because there's always more, isn't there? There can always be more. Once you put something in place, it's like, I've been looking over the years how you go from the LP records to the cassettes and then to the CDs and DVDs, videotapes, DVDs, and now onto the computer. It's all like a progress, if you think it is progress. But it's certainly an escalation. It doesn't just stop and stay, where it is. It just keeps adding and getting more and more along that line, which, I don't agree with that, because I think that it's a bit like, as I've said before, a bit like myself. If I could just have a few chocolates, that's not so bad. But if you're going to eat the whole block, it's, even if something is not, even if you think that something is not good for you, because I don't think Wi-Fi and stuff is really that good for this world anyway. Most people would probably agree with that. But it's the amount too, because I say the body can rejuvenate itself. The body can fight back and recover quite easily. In the past, I would have been very confident of this myself. But once you get too much of an escalation or too much of a tipping point, like I say, it's not what even is. Sometimes it's even the quantity that makes it really a deciding factor. That's what I think anyway. Obviously, you're better off. If you want to be the human at the top, you should be in a natural world where you haven't got anything that is going to contaminate or limit the human body, especially if you think that it does have great potential. If you think that it is only limited and that it is only meant to operate a certain way, and that, that all the occasional strange things you hear where some people can do a few interesting things, or even animals that can do so much more, as I've said before, then, this is not something that you're going to be interested in. But if you really do think that the body is at its lowest capabilities, and that and given the right fuel and given the right reality, that it could excel, and that even the human body, because obviously when I say we're spiritual beings in a body, I'm half implying that the body is not important and that we're something that is a soul spirit. But, and this may or may not be the full thing, but I still think that in this reality, in this earth, we were given a much more superior vehicle than what we can possibly imagine. But instead, it looks like a pathetical, poor vehicle, And there's probably reasons why that's happened. But anyway, I've gone off. The wrestling ring is coming down. The cage is coming down further on humans every day. And most humans are not even looking up to see it coming down. At least these two wrestlers already know that they're that in a wrestling match it's all staged, it's all false. That is the Matrix. The Matrix is like the wrestling it's already a virtual reality world. But the humans are like two wrestlers. But of course, obviously there's more than two, I would think. But either way, it's two opposing forces put into a ring with a steel cage coming down that is artificial in every way, and you can't see it coming down. And they don't know that they're in a wrestling ring with the steel cage, and they're not looking up. We never look up. They're looking down like we are. We're always looking down. We're never looking up at the sky or looking up to see what's there. We're too busy looking down at this material world, too busy looking down at the Matrix. Now, I know the Matrix is the whole thing, but the Matrix is, in my fantasy world, really it's the equivalent. If you look at it, if you are a low frequency human being, which I am, and you're seeing a negative aspect to this Matrix Earth, then really the Matrix is really nothing but, for me, a maximum security Earth, a maximum security prison that surrounds. Now, some people are happy in a prison. Some people, as I've said before in other videos, they stay so long in a prison they wouldn't know what to do if they got out, and they don't want to. And of course, some are there for life anyway. So they're never going to leave. Now, those that are never going to leave, they're very. If you were in there, you want to keep others there with you. You don't want your friends to go and leave, especially if you're a negative, low-frequency human being, as we all are. At high frequency, but either way, that's not the point. This, I think this is, in my fantasy way of looking at it, in my fairyland, even though it's a dark fairyland, we've gone into the horror movie fairyland now. We've gone into the negative fairy horror movies. Earth is a technological maximum security enclosure for low frequency negative beings of sorts. Now, in my fantasy way of looking at it, and it's probably, not Earth is the darkest region. Earth is the enclosure. In my fantasy, it is the lowest realm. It is the lowest area in all. I don't understand universes and cosmos and all these words they use. I do not think that, I do not know what is beyond Earth. I don't even know much about what's on Earth. I don't even know what's up in the sky. But I do think that this is a different region than elsewhere. It's a deciding reason. It's a deciding region. See, I don't know what I'm talking about. It is a battlefield. There is a World War III. There are opposing forces. There are protagonists. There are negative and positive forces battling it out. Most of the positive forces are unaware they're in a battle. The negative forces all know they're in a battle. The negative forces are consolidated. The negative forces are part of the matrix because the matrix is a low frequency negative domain. This is a maximum security prison enclosure. The God entity is the prison, what's the word for that? Oh dear. Geez, I'm hopeless at making these videos. I can't even think. Not the guards. They're the disciples. The main man, that runs the whole prison, in any prison that you have on Earth, because we have prisons on Earth, but Earth itself is a big prison. And the prison, what is it, superintendent? No, that's not it. Oh, this is terrible. Dear. I apologise greatly. It'll come back to me, but I'm not very good at concentrating, as you can see. Now, but that is the God entity. He controls the whole prison. And from an objective point of view, when you go into prison or into jail, you are confined there. You cannot go out. That is your world. This is our world, our Earth. Same thing. The God entity is the one that runs the whole thing, that has full power. The outside world does not matter to the God entity, because he can run that prison how he likes. So it doesn't matter if people are living a different life outside the prison. It doesn't matter if other people have got more freedom and don't have to obey certain rules and don't have to. In his prison, it is played out and operates according to his rules. Now, obviously, in a prison, there is still very basic laws and rules that the God entity has to abide by. But they'll be very basic. And as it's essentially his domain and he has full control over it, and he doesn't have to let anyone else in to the prison, provided, he doesn't like exterminate every prisoner that's in his prison, and he's not going to do that anyway because he wants to keep his prison going. He can pretty much, and especially in light of the reality that a prison is run by the prison guards and those that have the power and the control. The prisoners are victims. They have to do exactly as they are told. They can't make up any rules of their own. They might have some little privileges. I do not know. It would depend on how it's run. But you see, my point is that, and that's essentially what this world is like, because it is the lowest frequency place. Everything is played out between, like I say, the cage is coming down, and some of us have to battle a super pumped up wrestler that, is full of artificial this, that and whatever, and has been practicing and conditioning and knows how to wrestle. And some of us don't know how to wrestle. We don't want to wrestle. We don't like wrestling. We're out of condition. We're old. We're fat. We're this. And mentally, we also don't understand why we're fighting. We don't understand that we're even in a wrestling match, that we're in a Thunderdome, and we don't understand that. And why this is another thing. That is probably it's probably because we don't understand ourselves, and we don't understand the world because we're limited, because we are in a virtual reality world that we are told is this, that and everything. So we are now unprepared for this invisible World War III that's taking place. We don't even know it's taking place. It is a mind war. It is a physical war. It's a psychological war. Depending on who you are, where you are, and what is your weaknesses and what are your strengths, these are the things that will be played out in the battle. And most of the time you won't even know that there is a war taking place till you are like Superman, being weakened by kryptonite, exposed to it. You couldn't fly away, to avoid it. I didn't put this very well. But it's a dark reality. It's a dark situation. And because in some parts of this prison matrix world, reality, fantasy, dark, horror movie, the weapons of choice will be all chosen by the matrix. And most of the weapons employed will be invisible, so that like the silent killer cancer. It's a similar thing. In fact, that's a very good example, because that's something that most people do not understand how it kills. Because in a war, you don't have to have, like I say, hand-to-hand battles or even machines playing it out. It can be in different parts of the world. That will be the situation. That will be what creates the low frequency. But in other parts of the world, that will not be possible. And so, therefore, it will be played out silently, invisibly. And, you know, it is very much like that. But essentially, it will be with the aim of keeping the matrix at a low frequency and keeping human beings at low frequency. You know, any human being that what I'm trying to say is that, you know, before they built the technological cage that's slowly coming down over the combatants, shall we say? Is that the right word? I don't know, because I don't like all this sort of stuff. Like I say, I don't even like war movies or action movies. I don't like any of those sorts of movies even. But they're good examples. Now, you know, the humans are unaware that that cage is coming down. I lost my train of thought here again. And they've waited till the cage is down now, you know, before, you know, it really means that it doesn't mean see the frequency should have been raised before the cage came down. But the matrix knows the frequency, so the matrix knows when to bring the cage down. If a human being is at low frequency, then the cage can stay up. But also, to some extent, there has to be consent because, like I say, although it's a prison, there's still a kind of universal outside the prison as well. But this is not of any relevance if human beings consent to the prison rules and consent to the technology, for instance, right? Because even though that is detrimental to the human in this negative, dark reality sort of thing, if a human being chooses to accept it, then that is not breaking any rules at a spiritual level or any level on a human being, you see. So this is the whole thing. So you know, if like I say, if you're offered something and you accept it, even if it's a negative thing, the matrix is not responsible for that. So human beings have always had this free choice thing. It's kind of like that. But if you're in a prison, you will have less and less free choice. But you still have to kind of agree to some extent to those rules and to the conditions in the prison. But at a spiritual level, human beings are in a prison. But it is still a comparison. See, so I think that what has now happened, and it's probably true of all of us, I'm sure, if you're limited and if you don't know what it's like to really live and to really be at high frequency and to really be happy, and you've allowed negativity to be the norm in your life, you accept it. You're almost, like I said in the other thing, you're almost conditioned to it, and you don't expect to be at a high frequency. You will accept conditions that, if you had the comparison and if you knew how things were really meant to be, or how they or maybe even how they are outside of a prison. That's the whole thing too. Like if you're born into a prison and you've never been outside of a prison, you wouldn't know if other people outside that prison are living much, much better than you. You will, when they bring round your meal, it may be a poor meal. It may not have great sustenance. It may not be very nourishing. It may not be that great, but you will think it is good, because if you've never had a gourmet meal, never had, you won't know the difference. You will think you're doing all right. And it's kind of like that, I think. And that's the same with the standard of living. And if you think that this world is offering you the best, if you think that this world is technologically advanced at a scientific level, advanced in all different things, you're not going to see yourself as a spiritual being that could be so much better off. You're not going to think that, and you're not going to see it, because it's not in your reality. It's not what you've learned. It's not what you know. It's pure speculation and fantasy, like I do, but it's a nice fantasy. But unfortunately, it's not a nice fantasy in the sense that we are in the Matrix, and the Matrix is a negative battleground, really, for spiritual human beings. And it is, in my view, in my fantasy way of looking at it, the lowest region. Now, whether it was always meant to be this way, I do not think so. Just as I don't think that the human being is meant to be as they are now. But it's become that way. Now, and it operates that way, I think. It sorts things out, but it's not how I don't think it's how it's meant to be, but maybe it is. Maybe because it is the lowest realm, maybe that's why it is a battle to get out. Because I've allowed myself to hit the rock bottom and to go into the lowest frequency and to, um, always make the wrong choices and the negative things. And so then it doesn't get better, it gets more and more low frequency. So therefore the matrix has the right, and its negativity then can come right in because you're at that frequency of the matrix. If you choose to do things that are positive, you are rising above that negative matrix, and it can't touch you as much, I wouldn't think. But even that, I can't say 100% now, so I'm going to leave it because it gets too confusing. And I'm wasting your time with the video, but hopefully there's some sense to it, but I'm not getting that vibe myself that it is. But I will say this, I do think though, and this is purely based on not my own experience, not my own so-called enlightenment, that word that we use, not what I've experienced at all, but purely on what I see as opposition. This is how I've come to most of what I think and why I think everything is negative, is because I see opposition to things. I see opposition, and I see the matrix getting its best from what appears to be the weakest and what appears to be the lowest life forms. Now, this is only what I see or what I think, and but either way, there was a movie that I saw on the TV a few weeks ago, and I just tuned in because it was like it wasn't a war movie, but it was like ancient battles, I don't normally like those sorts of movies either, but I was interested because it had, because I was interested when I saw a documentary many years ago on the main character in it. I think it was called Saladin, the main warrior or leader or whatever of a group of people who, they were obviously his warriors and his soldiers, and he had an army and obviously was trying to take land. And I don't understand all the historical things of this because I haven't looked into it, and even when I watch the movie, I watch those sorts of movies at a very superficial level, unfortunately. If I had a better grasp of history and more knowledge on all these things, I think I would be able to piece things together much better, but I just haven't done that in my life. I haven't took an interest in all these things. And even now, I only do it more out of necessity rather than because, I am genuinely interested. Some things do fascinate me a little bit, but not all of these things. Not all leaders and history things interest me at all. Only occasionally something will just interest me for no reason. But anyway, in this movie, even though I don't fully understand all the connotations of it, this Saladin leader, he had a very large army, and he obviously wanted to take over these other group of people that also had an army, and they were in their castle and that was their area, but he wanted to take over it. Now, the ones that he wanted to take over, as the movie goes, and this is similar to another movie that I mentioned in one of the previous videos, the idea is similar in a funny kind of way. these group of warriors, soldiers, or the army, or whatever you like, they were much physically superior and spiritually, shall I say, superior. Okay, dare I say that? Because actually in the movie they were of a religious denomination, okay? But I don't understand all that, so I can't go into that. But I'm going to relate it to spirituality. And that spirituality then transcends into physical power. So the lesser numbered army, at an individual level, each individual fighter, shall we say, warrior, whatever, was vastly superior to the soldiers, warriors of Saladin. He himself was a very superior leader. He was very cunning. He was very, he understood the strategy of war and the strategy of taking, that's how he got his victory, you could say. Because although you would say, hey, but he had more numbers. But it was strange because the movie made it reasonably clear that even though the others had less numbers, because their soldiers and their spirits were much greater, they still should have won the battle. It was the separating the individuals, even though those individuals were more powerful individually, but separating them instead of combining, because Saladin had lesser warriors. They were inferior warriors, but he had vast numbers and they were all united in a common cause. They worked for him, they were obedient, and they followed his instructions to the letter. And so therefore they were a mighty force, even though individually they were weak, whereas the others were individually very strong. But he had strategies to separate them to where they were divided. They didn't make the right choice. Because they knew they were, in the movie, this is really not like humans, because most humans don't see themselves as powerful or being strong individually at all. And of course, in the present world, this is not the case, but at a higher level, they are. And they are the force behind the Matrix too, as I've said before, because they are. Everything that comes to the Matrix comes out of the human being. It's just that the human being doesn't know its input. It doesn't know that its energy is the driving force. At an individual level, we don't know this. And we don't know how valuable at this level that some really are, because we don't know that we see others as the more powerful, because as I've said, I think I put this in the other video, the good example, anyway, that movie was another example of how the more powerful forces were defeated by a coordinated, consolidated effort by the opposing force, even though it's weak individually and should not really have won, because even though there were lesser numbers in the others, they still could have won, but they were divided. The strategy of the leader defeated them. A bit like in that Troy movie that I saw, that's quite well known, where the Achilles, is it? He's the greatest fighter that ever was, the greatest warrior. So, he could take on 30 other men and still win, and in a hand-to-hand battle At least that's as the movie goes. And it's kind of like that. He was almost invincible. Not to mention that because he was so good, he was an inspiration, and that spirit spread to all his other warriors and those that were with him. So they fought better too. So it was like that. But essentially he was the best at that physical level, even though we're talking more about spiritual. But anyway, now I've gone off track. I've lost my train of thought again, as usual. So it's the numbers, and I've forgotten that one now. I lose it every time. See, I have to keep on track. Can't do it. Anyway, I'm going to say that, okay, I've got back on track again a little bit. Okay, so it's like this. In the real reality, even though it's all fantasy, there's a homeless man, right? He's sitting in the gutter, he's homeless. He's at the lowest level that a human can be in this matrix, in this society. Society is matrix too, in a way. He has no money. He has no future. He only has his thoughts. He's probably at a negative low frequency in his situation, but he still has his thoughts. But his thoughts, and because he has been put into that position in the matrix, he is a valuable energy, creative sustenance for the matrix and its minions and its disciples and the God entity. And it's important that he stays in that low frequency situation because he is valuable for the matrix, because the matrix wants his negative energy and the matrix wants his thoughts, because he is a spiritual human being. But the matrix doesn't want him to be a human being in the matrix that is that represents the matrix. No, because this is a spiritual human being. So the matrix will take the homeless man's creative thoughts, interesting thoughts, whatever, human thoughts, and put them into the matrix world that we live in. In other words, it will be given to others. The matrix will be able to technologically decipher his thoughts and make them into something for the matrix. The matrix is vacuous at that creative human feeling level. It is a technological machine. The God entity is of a negative nature. These have all happened for various reasons. I mean, there's genius here and there's intellect, but there's not humanity. That is got from the homeless man. And even if the homeless man was very intelligent, that does not matter because he's a spiritual human being, and the matrix doesn't have high-class spiritual human beings on show in the matrix, because the matrix likes to operate this video game, and that is very much a control type of thing, like in the movie The Matrix, where They say, what is the matrix? And they say, well, it's control. And, you can't, so you want to get what you can out of the spiritual human beings, but you want to have control. And spiritual human beings generally are a lot harder to operate for the matrix because they are spiritual human beings. They don't tend to want to be controlled as much either, and they might not agree to all the rules. You see, this is something that, or might not agree to that. That they might be of a different. It's like everything. People have different beliefs and different ideas, and if you don't fit that way, then you're not going to be in the club. You're not going to be in. It's like anything in any field. You want to work for in a particular job or in a particular profession. You have to go by the companies or the different things that run it. I don't understand all these things, as you can see, and I'm getting frustrated because it's all out of my league. But I still understand the basics, that if you're working for a particular thing, you agree to the rules of that company or whatever that you're working for, because it's in your interest to. That's your living, that's your future, and that's your life, and they will benefit you. But the homeless man does not fit into that, and he would be he has things that the matrix wants, but the matrix doesn't want the whole person. They don't like the whole. They only like the thoughts and the ideas, but they don't like the whole person. They don't like the whole spirit, shall we say, or whatever you want to call it. In other words, they only want some things from that person. But that whole person does not fit into the matrix. It is not going to be an entertainer or a spokesperson for the matrix in any way. The matrix likes to cherry pick and pick things from each person and use it for the matrix, but usually it doesn't like the whole. It only wants little things. It'd be like putting a composite of what is the best. They only will take certain things and they will manipulate it. But the homeless man will not benefit from it because, one, he won't know that he is contributing to the matrix, and two, he just would not be a suitable being for the matrix. Otherwise, if he was, he wouldn't be the homeless man. They wouldn't put him in that position. In other words, maybe the homeless man would not fit in if his vibration was higher. So therefore, one way or another, the homeless man has to be the homeless man. That's his position in the matrix. And that's how the matrix is. Everyone has a position in it. You don't always have a choice. Some people might have more choice than others. But at any rate, I went on too long and I think I have not made any sense and I've gone way off track. I actually deleted, which I never do, because I made a little video and I realised that although I said, maybe similar stuff, I'm not sure, but I was actually getting very frustrated and angry and shouting, and I don't think that's good for a video, and I don't think it's good, even though I know I hope that some people that listen understand that, but at the same time, you're talking, I'm saying that we're spiritual beings and all this frequency and stuff, and here I am shouting and getting frustrated and angry and saying everything is a negative and we're in a dark domain and the fantasy is now dark and we're headed towards the end of World War III and we don't even know we've been in a World War III and but see, this World War III is a different type because a war is essentially only where you lose spiritual human beings, right? Where you lose humans, where there is life lost, where they're gone from the matrix. And, in the past wars, there was great losses, but there was always a resurgence. There was always the ability to come back. And it was never a final battle, whereas World War III is the final war. Because you can't have any more than 3 world wars. You can't have any more than the 3, I don't think. I think everything goes in 3s. 3 strikes and it's over type of thing. They tell us these things. So I take everything literally. I take everything as a fantasy, but the fantasy becomes a reality. It is dark versus light, but we're in a reverse world, so light is dark and dark is light. Black is white, white is black. Good is bad, bad is good. Left is right, right is left. Goes on and on. That is just because of the nature of this fantasy reality. It is just not... and there are reasons for that. Because it... you could put it simply, even though the whole thing is vastly complicated, I would think. But that's only because, like I say, we only see a little bit. I only see a little bit. I know it's complicated because I see the negativity. I see the opposition. I don't see things or understand things, or I'm not in a position to go behind the curtain. I don't have privy to any information apart from, watching a few videos, but I see negativity in reality, and I see that as opposition to something more positive, even low. I see much positive stuff. But what is positive can sometimes still mask negativity. And because if this matrix was 100% dark and negative, and there was not anything good in it, and there was not tidbits of positive things, I don't think anyone would want to play at all. That's when things fall right down. But that's not going to happen because it isn't even like that. But it's necessary for that. And that it's kind of like this. How could I use an example? I could use examples, practical examples that I see around me, because that's where I usually realise something. Of course, there's more to it than that in my case, but, you could, like they could build something, right, that appears to be a benefit, that maybe I might think is good too. I might say, hey, that's more convenient, that's good, I like that. But I might not realise that something else has to be pulled down in order to create that, because my mind is focused on what is going to benefit me. But the matrix will offer that with the underlying desire for a negative. because the matrix is all negative, mainly negative. It doesn't do things for spirituality that way. It might appear to, but then again, also the matrix is a different type of spirituality too. It's a negative spirit. It's not a positive spirit. So, it is a negative spirit wants a different environment to a positive spirit. A negative spirit cannot survive in a positive spirit's environment, and a positive spirit cannot survive or is going to struggle in a negative spirit's environment. So it is a survival thing. It is a World War III. It is a cage match fight to the end, shall we say, where only one can get out of the door, out of the cage, or out of the Thunderdome, like in the Mad Max. It's all a bit like that, but I'm not using very good examples. I know, I wish I could find some better examples, but I haven't had much time to think about it. But it's still like that, I think. But anyway, I think I better close off because I went on too long and I don't think I've made any sense at all. See, I deleted the video because I was carrying on like this and I thought, hey, I'm shouting too much and I'm not making any sense and I'm wasted. But, perhaps I'll have to go back onto the movies, because if I stick on the movies and make a few points, I think that's better. I did mention movies here, but I didn't get it very well. I would also like to say I was about to fold up, and I should fold up, but it's just come to me. I mentioned One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? As a movie, where the fella goes in there and he's really sane. And even most of the people in there are not really... Well, they're clinically regarded as insane, right? Because they're in this mental institution. Now, in this world we live in now, we have psychopathic people. But as I've said before, and we've mentioned this before, with the numbers and things, with human beings. Now, psychopaths are clinically insane. Even narcissists are out of balance and are not in touch with reality, really. But these people now make up the majority of society. So we have a situation like the fact that we're in a maximum security prison, where we're also in a madhouse, an asylum, a mental institution. But what happens in this reality is the people that go into the asylums that suffer from schizophrenia and bipolar and psychotic types of things, where they're regarded as out of touch. Now look, I'm going to say, like this One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because that man that was in there was really just a high vibrational menace to the Matrix, in a way. That's what the movie was showing. But the other people that were in there were regarded as genuinely with mental problems. But look, I should really do this in a separate video, but it just occurred to me. Look, I have heard that schizophrenic people in the past, they are crazy because they would watch their TV and they would get messages from the television. They would think the television is real and is telling them things. Well, see, this is no different to what I say, really. I'm saying the Matrix is just as much real on your TV. The movies are just as much a reality. So yes, you are getting messages from them. They are showing you a reality. So I guess what I'm saying is that, maybe there is no real schizophrenia. Maybe that is just a human being that has gone to a higher vibration and is picking up stuff that we all miss on the TV. That they don't realise that the Matrix is, yes, speaking to them directly and showing them and telling them things. But if they say that to someone else, they're like, oh, you are crazy. You're schizophrenic, because that is just a made-up thing. That is not talking to you. You are not a spiritual human being. You are not special. Why would that be saying? But I'm saying that all of this is about that. It is about that. The human being is the centre of the matrix. So, of course, the matrix centres around them, because it needs, it feeds and gets its stuff off the human being and then puts it onto the TV for the less spiritual, for the ones that, for those that are part of the matrix, shall we say, because they are working for the matrix. Look, there's lots of reasons that it's put on the TV and on the computer, etc. But all I'm saying is that in the past, those that read more into what was coming on the TV, and I say the TV because that was in the past, but it's still the same now. You get it with the computer. They're classed as schizophrenic, out of touch with reality, because they're saying, hey, there's no connection. This TV is not put here just for you. It's not showing you anything. There is no synchronicity. There is no message here. Well, I'm saying that, yes, it is all like this. And people in the past, and even now maybe, that are put in asylums, they are not out of touch. They're only out of touch because they do not believe in the fantasy world that is our reality. They are seeing another reality. Now, which reality is real is open to debate. But I'm saying that they are probably seeing the real reality. Yes, of course, they are getting the messages that the rest of us are missing. They are seeing that their thoughts are coming back out to them from the TV. They know that it is connected to them because it is a technological matrix where the human is the cog and does send out the information which the matrix receives and then sends back through television, through computer, through all sorts of things, through even the very environment, through just the way we live, through everything. It is because the matrix would be a dull, dead place without the human being. And if it became so dead and dull, even the totally technological human beings that are part of the matrix and just function almost in a mechanical way for the matrix, because that's how we become, let's be honest. I mean, this is what happens to us all, because a lot of it's out of necessity. If you have to work in a factory to survive, you're going to have to do that mechanical, boring, repetitive stuff. And you may or may not be able to lose yourselves in a daydream while you're doing it. If you can do that, you're still a spiritual human being and you're still functioning. But, on the other hand, if you put headphones on and are connected to the matrix, you see, then, your thoughts are going to the matrix. You're connected to the matrix. I've lost you, so I know I've lost you. I shall have to fold up, but I hope I haven't bored you and been too ridiculous like I am. But all I'm saying is that I think that in the past, the only people that were really in touch with the real reality, which even though they would have been classed as being in fantasy land, were put in the asylums. Whereas the vast majority that live on the earth and that work in the matrix, they are the ones who are really clinically insane, because they are the less spiritual. They're more they've become negative. They've got the negative Archon mind parasites in their minds. They've become more of the narcissistic, psychopathic personality type, they are now the majority of human beings. So what I'm saying is we live in a reverse world. So the crazy people are on the outside and the sane people are in the asylum. They used to have a saying, the inmates run the asylum. Well, the inmates run this world, which is an asylum. And when we have little prisons and little asylums that keep the sane people there, the high vibrational people, that's if there's any, but those that have some life in them, some potential, and they can feed the matrix, and they can also be kept at low vibration so that they do not change the matrix, because we wouldn't want the matrix to go out of balance, would we? We wouldn't want it to go into a positive thing, because then it falls down. See, this is kind of how it works, I think. And even a balance is not really suitable for the matrix 100% because it's a low frequency realm. It's the lowest realm there is. It is the worst that can be. One should not fear dying and going somewhere else. This is it. You know, some people can make a better deal of it. And it's not meant to be shown, because if it's shown, then some human beings will not like that. Because even negative human beings they don't want to be surrounded and realise that every other human being is negative either. You know, they like to feed off positive human beings, as the Matrix does. But if they realise that it's a total negative realm and that there's very little positive, even some of them would be like, oh, this is a funny reality. This isn't what they thought. They would find that disturbing too, even though they are negative beings. So I don't think I made that point very well, actually, but you know, it's a bit like I was saying, like the narcissist and psychopaths. They don't like positive human beings, but they need them. I like to be around them, but they like to frustrate them and annoy them and even destroy them at the very worst. And the Matrix is like that, but they still need them. So the Matrix has a love-hate relationship with spiritual human beings to some extent. It basically is like a bully that bullies someone that they appear to not like, and they don't like the person they bully, but they also secretly, the fact that they go out of their way to bully someone that has done them no harm and that probably doesn't and may even like them. I know this myself because I have experienced this when I was very young. And, you know, like there were some people that I actually liked and looked up to and admired, but they did not like me at all. And I wondered why, because I thought, hey, I would like to be your friend. I think you are good. But there's something still about me that they did not like, bothered. And I figured it out what it was years and years later, of course, but the Matrix is like that. It bullies what it doesn't like, what it despises, what it hates. But it also needs that person to bully. It still needs something of that person. So it hates it because it needs it, like the narcissist. And the psychopath, they hate their victims in a way. They hate them, but they need them because they need that hit of whatever it is. The same as the bully needs to bully the person. There's no real reason, but they get a thing out of it. It makes them feel good. And so they pick out particular people because even though they might appear to be better, there's something in that other person that they don't like, that they see something in that person that they lack, or something that they secretly envy or can't have, or whatever. Whatever the reason, there's probably a lot of reasons, even though at a superficial level it would appear that they're the better and they're the big bully, they're the superior person. But they need that person to bully just the same. And the matrix is like that with spiritual human beings to some extent. They don't like them, they don't want them, but they need them. They need that homeless man. They want him in the gutter. They don't like him. They think he's reprehensible. But they also know that he has a value for the matrix. And so they're angry at him. They want to get rid of him, but they can't get rid of him because they're using him to feed the matrix. His creative little thinking, his whatever, is food for the matrix. Because the matrix doesn't want to expose itself as being all negative and cold and stark and empty. No. Even low, the matrix does really enjoy negativity. But if it was all negative for the spiritual human beings, they'd wonder what they're in. They'd be like me. They'd be like, oh, we're in a fantasy, all right, but this is a horror movie fantasy. We've got to get out. Before the cage comes right down. They've got to get beyond Thunderdome. Yeah. But how we do it, And this is a fantasy. This is my negative video, the World War III, the invisible thing. I didn't put it very well. I might have to make another video and delete this one, but I haven't got the effort and the energy for it. I kind of have, but I like to put it. I would like to make the videos into much less, particularly as I'm not live, because if I'm live, I would imagine you could go and have a cup of tea or a drink or something and chat or do other things, whereas if I'm making a proper video, it should be concise, to the point, and more professional, etc., etc. But I don't really know how to do that. So I'm only hoping that the people that do listen, the few, don't mind that so much. But I still would prefer to at least be a bit more, not all over the place, because it's hard to follow things. If you're going to have a fairy tale or a story, it should at least have a start, middle and end, and be a little bit flow a little bit, instead of like jumping from the end to the front to the back like I think I do, because I don't think that it makes full sense as a whole. But hey, this world doesn't make full sense to me as a whole, and I think I understand it a little bit, but I don't really know what makes it fully tick, in the sense that I don't see it. I only see the matrix. I only see the negative matrix, and even that is how you perceive it. But it's not really how you perceive it. It does depend on your circumstances. Each person will have not only a different reaction to the matrix, but their circumstances will be different. Even if you're living in the same street, your circumstances are still going to be different. Even the area can be a deception, because you could look at an area and say, oh, that looks like a good area. But you don't know the misery of some people in those individual houses, because you can't see. As I say, it's an invisible battle in a way, because it's a bit like, as I just said, if someone is very sick and got all sorts of illness, they could be living in a very nice house and have a lot of money, but it's still going to be a misery, isn't it? They're going to be really low frequency and in a bad way. And this is it. You can't always see the truth of things. And the truth is stranger than fiction a lot of the time too in this world, because we don't understand what causes a lot of things. We don't see the true reality of of how humans are affected by, yes, by kryptonite, like Superman weakened by kryptonite. We don't know what our kryptonite is. We don't even know what we are. And we don't know what we're meant to be. So we certainly don't think that we're Superman under the influence of kryptonite. And we certainly don't think that we can ever be a Superman. We think we can only be a Superman or a Wonder Woman if we go along with the Matrix, with the science, and with their idea of what is advancing a human being and making them stronger, healthier and better and more super, etc. Because that's what we will only know. And whether you believe it or whether you think it's good or bad will be up to yourself. Obviously someone like me that thinks that we've devolved doesn't think that the direction we've taken is the one for our benefit or to be super in any way. But, I can see how people would think that though. But anyway, I better close because it's getting late now, and I usually get cut off with this thing, but I feel as though I've been talking a long time, and I know that I missed half the things I was supposed to talk about, and I would really, it's not that important, but it would be nice to make a reasonable video that makes a bit of sense and that, keeps on track, etc. Yeah, it was at least a decent fairy tale, shall we say, but I guess I wasn't cut out to write a book or to write fairy tales. But, who knows? Like I say, the homeless man probably wasn't either, but the Matrix still likes some of his tidbits, the Matrix still enjoys some of his thoughts, and the Matrix can make a book out of those little random thoughts. Because the Matrix doesn't have the basis of creativity. The Matrix doesn't have the basis of the humanity or the human. But once it gets a bit of it, then it can, yes, make a book. Then it can give it to those that are young and beautiful and will present a good image and a picture. I might be a wreck and I might wear terrible clothes, but I still might have good taste in my mind, so I might be able to recognise something nice on someone else. The Matrix sees this. The Matrix says, hey, that is good. That is a good, that's something that we can use in the Matrix. That's how it pretty much works in a way. It's a bit like market research, only the human does it, but they don't always, sometimes they do it consciously, and other times it's unconscious because the Matrix knows everything because it is the all-seeing eye, it is the God entity, the technology is vast, the Matrix itself is much more vast than what humans realise. To me, the Matrix is a simple natural realm, but it is really not. It is not simple and it's not natural. But that's how it appears to us because that keeps us comfortable and keeps us battling it out in this simple natural world where we think that is the bottom line. And we're battling a battle that is already nearly lost in the sense that World War III is nearly on its closing stages in my fantasy way of looking at it. So therefore, whatever is going to happen will happen. And also, like I say, it's like, it's such an unbalanced matrix now that the scales have gone so much into the negative that unless you like the negative and you are of this technological matrix kind of mindset and of this world, shall we say, then you really are on the defeated end. And but I could be wrong, and also there the matrix does change all the time. Like you can have bad weather one day and then the sun can come out the next day for no reason. So what it really hinges on, how many people it really hinges on. But like I say, the matrix knows all this anyway, so it's not likely to allow the sun to illuminate the whole thing and, and change it to where the vast majority of inhabitants are going to find it inhospitable. So the minority of spiritual human beings will definitely be on the outer. And this is just because it's not our domain, and we're under the delusion that it is our domain and has always been our domain, but it is not and has not been for a long time, I wouldn't think. But then again, like I say, it's been put there, it's in existence, and it is it's there where maybe the tougher, because it is so hard, and humans will now be doing it the really, really, really hard way. Like, I can't do it the hard way. The hard way is doing it intellectually, observing, seeing the results like I'm doing, without really seeing it, but knowing that you're battling against it. Now, whereas the normal way and the easy way would have just been like I supposed was supposed to happen, where you would just automatically live and exist and therefore rise the vibration. Once you realise your mistakes and you see people in a different light and you rid yourself of a certain amount of the negativity, and you realise what's important. You realise that it is important to keep the individuality, the kind of free thinking, the kind of free, like this world has now moved towards so much more technology and stuff, which is really restrictive, even though it gives you more information. That also is a mindset too. See, so, so I can be right and wrong there, but it's really not, because, if you hold to the core belief that the frequency then opens up all those doorways to where you just automatically will see things and know things, then all the other information is obsolete anyway. You don't need it. And it would even be a hindrance, because with information in the matrix, and with the matrix the way it is, you have to sift through so much. You have to decipher everything. It's doing it the hard way, and it's a maze. You may or may not be able to get out that maze. You won't know what is real or what is not. You won't know what is the true reality. You won't know what you should believe or what you should think is good or bad even, because it will be like that. Good and bad, you won't know 100%. You should know. Like, you should be able to, as I say, look at things even at face value and think, what I'm seeing is what I'm really seeing. But in the matrix, you will second guess yourself. You will second guess what you see. Because that's what I now realise, looking back over my life. Things have been presented to me many, many times. Just at face value, I knew something was wrong. But the matrix second guesses you, the matrix will have an explanation as to why something's wrong. So you won't just look at it and say, that's wrong, full stop. What I'm seeing is what I'm seeing. It's not right somehow. You will go for the information. You will go for the input of the matrix. The matrix has an explanation for everything. 2 explanations usually. And you have your own instinct, intuition on things. The matrix isn't interested in intuition or your natural reaction to things. The matrix wants to give you an explanation, and it will fit with reality. Whereas if you go away from the matrix, you are going into fairyland. It will not fit with reality. Not unless you have some core basis of what you think is the correct thing or the beneficial thing, that sort of thing. Am I making sense or not? I don't think I am. I better fold up. Sorry to have not been more to the point and more believable, shall we say? But anyway, you know, if I'm talking to a child of the matrix, then not only is my video poor at every level, but it doesn't make any sense. But if you're a little bit more into thinking that anything and everything is possible, well then, you know, you might get something out of it. But either way, I don't think that I do it very well, but that's because the matrix has now exposed itself to be a lot more complicated for me too. You know, it's not just about saying, oh, there's a few things wrong, and if people could see that some things are not to their benefit or that, then we've solved the whole thing. And of course, you're never going to have a perfect world. That's another thing too. This illusion of chasing a perfect world, as I've said before, is also a dangerous thing, because you know, you can have things being peaceful and perfect, but you know, it will be at the expense of, you know, the human being is in the matrix to create a bit of chaos, even though the whole matrix is chaos. Like, a human being creates chaos only because at times they see the matrix as to something, you know, that they will question something in the matrix because they might think that it isn't beneficial, and that creates the chaos. So then the matrix has to come back and try to bring that human being into thinking that it's not chaos, and that there's that what they do has a benefit, and that they're on the right track. If you don't use specific examples, then I'm not very good at the concepts unless I keep on them simple too, so I better fold up. Sorry to have went on for so long and to have somehow or other not been quite coherent. Anyway, good night.